getting closer. The princess is somewhere nearby. I can feel it.
It had been a little while since we'd seen a DCEU project in theaters by the time Black Adam was released, after the company delayed numerous projects. I won't lie and act like Black Adam is one of my favorite characters, but I was familiar with him from his days in Captain Marvel comics, and I was hunting for that DC Universe classic Wave 9 Black Adam for years as a kid. Anyhow, I was moderately excited to see the Justice Society on screen. I would have loved to see Green Lantern Alan Scott, The Flash Jake Garrick, and Wildcat added to the roster, to name a few. But I must admit, seeing Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate in promos had me excited. He may be my least favorite main series Bond, but I still love Pierce Brosnan, and thought this would be a cool new look for him, since he hasn't been in a lot post-Bond, but some cheap action films and a few rom-coms like Mamma Mia. However, where I was skeptical was The Rock playing a more serious role. You see, The Rock is at his best when he's a goofy, nice guy. That is just like you and me, except he's 400 pounds and 99% muscle. Sadly, this film disappointed me. Black Adam was just a good guy this time around, with a tragic backstory that is just occasionally kind of a dick. The Rock didn't really play a villain well either. It's kind of ironic too, since this was such a passion project for him, with him starting work on the project way back in 2006, when he was approached by the original director, Peter Siegel, to play Shazam. At which point, The Rock fell in love with the character of Black Adam more than Captain Marvel. His Shazam film was being developed till about 2009 when it was shelved. However, in 2014, with the DCEU starting, the project was pulled back off the shelf and put back into active production, with The Rock interested in signing on. There were some doubts about putting The Rock in the film because of the profile of the actor growing significantly as an action hero in the years since he was first approached for the role back in 2006. The Rock met with Jeff Johns in 2017 to discuss the story, and at that point they decided the best course of action would be to split the film into two films, one about Shazam and one about Black Adam. The plan, of course, being to have the characters meet at some point after each solo film. This would allow the star power of The Rock to shine through and establish his vision without being a supporting actor in a Shazam film. The script for Black Adam was finished late in 2017, with the original plan to introduce Black Adam in the Suicide Squad 2 in a small capacity before that film was changed into The Suicide Squad, with the spec script for that film seeing the squad, led by Deadshot and Harley, tracking a secret weapon that turned out to be someone harnessing Black Adam's powers. This was then changed to a Deathstroke movie before it was turned into the James Gunn movie, so all these plans fell through. The Rock was, of course, pretty busy, so he couldn't officially start production until he finished the second Jumanji film, as well as Netflix's Red Notice, which he was doing with Ryan Reynolds and DCEU co-star Gal Gadot. Production finally did happen, with The Rock starring and Jamie Colette Sierra directing, after The Rock worked with him on The Jungle Cruise the year before for Disney. After a 16-year journey, the film finally came out, although The Rock would get in some controversy as well working on the film. Dwayne Johnson hoped to essentially hijack the DCEU and create it to center Black Adam. He started by bringing back Henry Cavill for an ill-fated end credits scene.
The opportunity to actually be back and to look to the future and to build something exciting.
Only for the actor to be let go from the Superman role in favor of David Cornsweet, who will play Superman in James Gunn's new Superman movie. This was announced soon after Cavill's return, which misled fans into believing that Cavill was set up to meet with Black Adam, along with renewing interest in Man of Steel 2, which The Rock somewhat alluded to as well. He was quoted as saying that Black Adam would meet up with characters like Wonder Woman. At one point, he went so far as to say Black Adam may exist in another dimension, and we might see him go against characters like Matt Reeves' Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker. The Rock was not only trying to hijack the DCEU and essentially make Black Adam the center of the DCEU, but possibly the entire DC multiverse as a whole. The plans, while ambitious, were contingent on the critical and commercial response of the first Black Adam film. After the commercial failure of the film, James Gunn and Peter Safran got control of the DCU, and these plans were all discarded.
The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
If that wasn't enough, though, after the film underperformed, The Rock was allegedly spreading false financial reports to make the film look better in the press, saying Warner was set to gain 60 to 70 million off the movie, which, while not groundbreaking, isn't a terrible haul. However, Warner revealed these numbers were inflated. He also angered executives by going right to the Warner Bros. CEO to pitch new projects rather than working with the teams in charge of the DCEU directly. Basically, it was all a huge mess and probably didn't help at all during the dying breaths of the DCEU.
Things will never be the same, because the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
The story of Black Adam starts in 2600 BC in the fictional country of Kondak, which is sort of like a Middle Eastern, Egypt-style country. Regardless, the king of the region, Akton, hopes to harvest the super space-made Guffin metal to forge a crown that would make him unstoppable, but a local boy acts as a martyr, eventually being given the powers of Shazam, a la Billy Batson nearly 5,000 years later. He uses the power to end the reign of Akton, but soon after is killed, after transferring his powers to his enslaved father, Teth Adam. Anyway, the present-day Kondak is similarly impressed by the now colonizing army called Intergang that is making life a pain for civilians in the region. They, along with a series of archaeologists led by Adriana Tomaz, are looking for the legendary crown of Sabak, which was forged during the flashback. Anyways, Adriana finds the crown, but Intergang follows, and she reads some ancient text that awakens Teth Adam from his 5,000-year slumber. After a battle with Intergang, Black Adam is now a known threat, which alerts Amanda Waller, who herself has gotten control of the Justice Society, which is basically an above-the-board super team consisting of Dr. Fate and Hawkman, along with some fresh rookies, Cyclone and Atom Smasher. The group comes to blows with Black Adam, but eventually Black Adam, the Justice Society, and Adriana team up to protect the crown and try to keep it out of Sabak's clutches. Anyhow, one of the archaeologists on Adriana's team, Ismael, ends up being the leader of the terrorist group Intergang and kidnaps Amon, this annoying kid that's Adriana's son. Adriana hands over the crown to Ismael, who starts to harness the power, but Black Adam kills him and injures Amon in the process. This reminds him of how his son died, so he gets sad and turns himself into Amanda Waller, who locks him in a stasis chamber thing with a gag so he can't say Shazam and easily break out. Though, through a slightly strange and confusing sequence, it turns out Ismael wanted to be killed so he could come back to life as the evil CGI version of his ancestor, Sabak. Black Adam just ends up breaking free of the prison and gets in a fight with Sabak and wins relatively easily. Black Adam, now that the day is saved, decides to stick around and become the guardian of Kondak so he can finally be the hero Kondak needs or whatever. Black Adam is the lead, obviously. Black Adam feels guilty about the death of his son, who sacrificed himself to save Black Adam. His son was not only a martyr that freed Kondak originally, but also a noble hero that Black Adam wants to be, but is so grief-stricken and desperate for revenge that he can't be. The reason Adam was locked away for millennia is because he attacked the wizard Shazam and his colleagues, killing most of them till Shazam could lock him away. Black Adam was mad how his son passed away and didn't really want to be a hero till the end, when he kind of avenged his son more or less. This arc is alright, I guess, but it's not the most well done, especially given the jumbled nature of the movie that was designed primarily to kick the viewer between action scenes. The Rock is too flat and edgy. It feels a bit like a retread of his Scorpion King role, which I suppose makes sense since The Rock has been working to make this film happen since he starred in the Scorpion King way back. My biggest problem with all this is that Black Adam is Shazam's main villain. There isn't really room for Black Adam to fight Shazam in this universe since he's just a plain old superhero now, albeit one that may kill if it's what he's got to do. It would be like making a Joker movie where he just becomes a good guy at the end.
Have you seen what it's like out there?
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Do you ever actually leave the studio?
The art kind of takes away from both characters. I know in the comics he's occasionally been a bit of an anti-hero, but I don't know. I never really saw him as a hero. This would perhaps be less of an issue if the movie was less messy, but I don't know why they don't just adapt the actual character they're trying to adapt. Hawkman is here, and I'm glad they added him to the Justice Society, though I'll admit that he's probably the society member with the least development of the group. He doesn't like Black Adam's method, and this causes some conflict between the two early on, with some arguments and stuff about how Black Adam shouldn't kill. At one point, Dr. Fate sees a vision that shows that perhaps Hawkman would be killed during his conflict with the CGI Sabbac, but that kind of just makes Hawkman sad.
But you died.
Should have told me sooner. I have no fear of death.
We don't get much of him trying to change his fate or anything like that, so that's more of Dr. Fate's arc, and is really not that tied to Hawkman, honestly. Dr. Fate is basically the father of the Justice Society, played by former James Bond Pierce Brosnan, and I have to say he was a fun choice and probably the best part of the film. He's not deep, just cool. Anyways, as I said, he is sort of the wise father of the Justice Society, a sort of Obi-Wan to the Falcon crew and A New Hope, so to speak. Much like Obi-Wan, he sacrifices himself for the greater good during the conflict with Sabbac. He took on Sabbac alone in order to protect Hawkman and the younger members of the Justice Society, which bought enough time for Black Adam to arrive and fight the creature. Atom Smasher is one of the rookie heroes along with Cyclone. I wish I had more to say about either, really. Atom Smasher's a bit reckless and runs in headfirst into battles. He can grow a la Ant-Man in the Avengers films, but I don't know. He's kind of just fight scene fodder. We also see his uncle Al Pratt, who is in this universe the original Atom Smasher, though in the comics he's just Atom. Regardless, whatever. Cyclone uses nanotechnology to basically have tornado powers. She's kind of the smart one of the duo, while Atom Smasher's the heart, but again, they're both kind of just fight scene fodder, and there's not really much to say about them. Adriana Tomaz is the archaeologist POV main character, which is kind of a rare thing for the DCEU, bar like Lois Lane and Man of Steel and stuff, but given the fact that Black Adam is an ancient superpowered warlord guy, sort of made sense since she gets the plot rolling and grounds the movie slightly in humanity, I suppose. She is, as you'd expect, a scientist from Kazakh that fights for the greater good and finds Sabbac's crown. Her brother Kareem is here occasionally, and he's the comic relief kind of goofball character that occasionally lands, but for the most part he's just kind of cringe. And finally, probably equally important to Adriana herself, is her son Aman, who is the link to Black Adam's slight humanity, reminding him of his son who fell trying to save his life, and sort of gets him motivated to help Kazakh in this new unfamiliar world that Black Adam finds himself in. Finally, we have the villain Sabbac, who is kind of three people, since originally he merged with Akhton, then his descendant Ishmael, before becoming the man, the myth, the legend, Sabbac, who basically looks and acts like a CGI Satan from the caverns of hell, with his CGI legion of skeleton guys that menaces the group. Truthfully, he kind of falls into the standard Achilles heel of any villain, that there isn't really anything special to him. He's just a CGI guy who wants to take over the world and whatever else. Nothing really special here, to be honest, and they don't really add much to his arc. The characters are all kind of flat and sort of play their roles, but no one ever really gets much depth. The only one who really has an arc is Black Adam, but he's still pretty basic. He meets a kid who reminds him of his son, and he decides to be a hero rather than a villain he initially seemed to be or whatever. But The Rock plays Black Adam so flat he doesn't connect with me on any level, and I honestly have more fun whenever Dr. Fate is on screen, because despite being undercooked, he's at least visually interesting. And Pierce Brosnan has a ton of charm. The cinematography was handled by Lawrence Sher, who shot other films like the Hangover trilogy, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and Joker, working frequently with Todd Phillips before working under director Jaume Colette Sierra for this project, who despite working consistently on films like Liam Neeson's Run All Night and Jungle Cruise with The Rock, seems to have been more there to put The Rock's vision out somewhat cohesively, with most of what he does here seemingly having been pushed by The Rock and his team. For Cher's part, he actually seems solid as a cinematographer. The movie isn't spectacular looking, but it's nice enough and the film's pretty coherent, though I will say the CGI is mixed. It seems the effects team did a decent job bringing some of the characters to life, with the villain Sabak actually being one of the better looking villains that were exclusively CGI in the DCEU. I think the red is unique and it isn't muddy and over-designed like many similar characters in these movies. Tonally, this film tries to be serious, edgy, and comedic. While I think the Suicide Squad did a good job of getting those tones down, Black Adam didn't do as well. The film is occasionally funny, but the tone is so all over the place and the film fails to really mesh the tones coherently, making a lot of sad moments hollow, funny moments out of place, and serious moments that are undercut by paper-thin plot that you'd expect to see in an early 2000s adventure film, not a modern action adventure. It's confused to say the least, and honestly, a lot of the time, despite attempting to make something of a unique tone, often comes off cornflakes level bland. Alright, let's look at the characters and where they're adapted from. The Justice Society appears for the first time in this film and is a recurring superhero team in the DC Universe that first appeared in All-Star Comics number 3 in 1940. Core members include Alan Scott, the Golden Age Green Lantern, Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Flash, Wonder Woman, Black Canary, Stargirl, Al Pratt's Atom, Dr. Fate, Dr. Midnight, Hourman, Johnny Quick, Johnny Thunder, Sandman, Starman, Wildcat, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific, to name several. In the film, it's a much smaller organization with only a handful of confirmed members, including Hawkman, Dr. Fate, Cyclone, and Atom Smasher, with Al Pratt's Atom being a former member of the team, seemingly. Black Adam first appeared in Marvel Family number 1 from 1945, and for decades was the main villain of the Marvel Family. More recently, he's been a neutral force in the DC Universe, occasionally helping out the good guys and occasionally coming to blows with them, which is much more the character they adapted for the film. Octon was originally a Metamorpho villain, who was the original Metamorpho in continuity, being created in The Brave and the Bold, number 57 from 1965. Later on, it was said that he trapped Teth Adams' family. This part of his history was adapted. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem he has cool Metamorpho powers in the film. Sabak is a recurring villain to the Marvel Family, who first appeared in Captain Marvel Jr. issue 4 in 1943. In his original appearance, he is a Nazi spy who went to hell and then got the powers of Sabak, facing up against Captain Marvel Jr. in his first issue. The character has been reinterpreted many times, but is almost always connected to Freddie Freeman or Captain Marvel Jr., or Shazam Jr., or whatever you want to call him these days, since the Marvel Family's names got really confusing. Adriana Tomaz in the comics wields the Amulet of Isis and is the current wife of Black Adam, first appearing in her own TV show, Isis, which was a spin-off to the 70s Shazam TV series in the episode The Lights of Mystery Mountain. She later came to the comics in issue 25 of the 70s Shazam comic series. In the film, she's a POV adventure character that takes little from the comics and the show, but the name Adriana Tomaz. This is another character that was created in other media, adapted back to the comics, and then readapted for the screen. Hawkman first appeared in Flash Comics number 1 in a side story and has been a consistent player in the DC Universe ever since, with his wife Hawkwoman or Hawkgirl, depending who's writing it. Hawkman is always reincarnated after death, meaning there have been various versions of the character and his wife, but the two always find each other and always end up in their Hawk personas. Hawkman is a frequent member of the Justice League and Justice Society, with different versions of himself being early members of both. Hawkman and Hawkgirl may be the two most convoluted characters in the DC universe, which is really saying something, and if I explain this lore in depth, I'll probably double the length of this video and have a brain aneurysm and then die. So I'll leave it saying that he's kind of a cool, kind of odd character who's kind of a cool choice. Also, you can read on the Hawkman lore on the DC wiki. They just have a whole page about it, so you can try to make sense of his timeline. It's kind of interesting though. Cyclone is a newer character relatively, being created in Justice Society Volume 3 number 1 from 2007. There are a solid amount of characters with similar concepts, but this is the version in the film. In the comics, she became a member of the Justice Society because of her grandmother, the original Red Tornado, not to be confused with the later, more famous android version, and is the caretaker of the Justice Society headquarters and is an honorary member of said group. In the film, she gets her superpowers from nanites that give her her powers, which is probably a little easier to explain than the somewhat convoluted lore she gets her powers from in the comics. Abigail Hunkel is mentioned in the movie and is the original Red Tornado. We don't know if this version of the character has any powers, but the original Red Tornado does not, despite her metahuman granddaughter who has similar powers to the android version of Red Tornado, which is her successor. In the comics, Atom Smasher first appeared in All-Star Squadron number 25 from 1983. Atom Smasher is the godson of Al Pratt, the original Atom, and his successor, after Damage, who is Al Pratt's biological son, was put in foster care and abandoned by his deadbeat father. Anyways, Atom Smasher can grow to massive size and is incredibly strong, kind of tying in with the character of both versions of the Atom, Al Pratt and Ray Palmer. The movie simplified his origin by having the original Atom, Al Pratt, as his uncle. Al Pratt, who was mentioned in this video a few times now, is the original Atom of Earth 2 and a primary member of the Justice Society, first appearing in All-American Comics number 19 from 1940. He was just a really strong guy who was kind of short in the film, and in the film he was played by the Fonz himself, Henry Winkler. Dr. Fate is a pretty cool character. He was created in More Fun Comics number 55 in 1940 and was a major player in the Justice Society throughout its entire lifespan. The primary version is Kent Nelson, but the helmet has changed hands numerous times, including a weird mother-son duo that owns Dr. Fate's helmet, and then they got married for some reason after being reincarnated. Dr. Fate's a weird character. This version is played by Pierce Brosnan, and is pretty accurate to the comics, I suppose. He's more or less the DC Universe's Doctor Strange and plays a role throughout the universe, though he mostly pals around with the Justice Society, as I said. The music was done by Lauren Balfe, who's worked pretty consistently since he broke out in the early 2010s. The 10s? What are we calling that decade? Anyhow, it wasn't bad by any means, which I noted in my notes here. But actually thinking back, none of the music really stood out to me, and I can't really remember any of the scores off the top of my head. The film also had some licensed tracks like Baby Come Back and Paint It Black, which stood out as a bit cheesy since those songs are already kind of attached to other film moments for me. Baby Come Back at the super cringe moment in Transformers 2007 when Sam Witwicky was flirting with Michaela, and Paint It Black in one of Stanley Kubrick's many opuses, Full Metal Jacket, both of which came to mind when hearing those songs. I don't think CGI Dwayne Johnson fighting guys to Paint It Black was particularly subtle. You know, The Rock is Black Adam and the song is Paint It Black. Whatever though. The editors are basically workman editors. You had Michael Sale, who did We're the Millers, and The Rock, Gal Gadot, and Ryan Reynolds' forgotten film Red Notice, and John Lee, who has been in many of editorial departments, such as the editorial department for The Matrix, Tenet, and The Prestige. Overall, the editing is good. It gets the job done and gets the muddled script and its many ideas to screen alright, I suppose. Amanda Waller shows up as a drone in the end credits, threatening Black Adam, but he destroys it, not seeing it as a real threat. More notably, Superman shows up to kind of feel out Black Adam and see what his intentions are, and implying the sequel will feature both of the powerful heroes teaming up or bumping heads.
It's been a while since anyone's made the world this nervous.
This was famously Henry Cavill's first appearance as Superman since Justice League and would end up being his last appearance in the DCEU, though he did show up via CGI in The Flash. This has been a contentious post-credits because just weeks later, James Gunn announced the reboot of the DCEU, which would quickly follow with an announcement for the upcoming Superman film, then titled Superman Legacy, which would star David Cornsweet as Superman, officially replacing the DCEU's take where Henry Cavill was Superman. This would be contentious since people saw it as stealing the role from Cavill.
I just don't understand this. There's no reason why we need to see how Superman puts his suit on. Usually he already has it on because he's ripping his shirt off and he's going out into battle, right? We don't need to see, or he's hopping in a telephone booth, even though we don't really have telephone booths anymore. And he does his little spin around and he's back out, and he's off into battle. Or he just runs through a door and he's Superman the next time we see him. Like, I don't need to see how he puts his clothes on. It's utterly ridiculous and dumb. It doesn't matter. The guy moves really fast. He puts his clothes on in a snap, and he's out there fighting the battle. I don't need to see him slowly putting a boot on. I mean, it really makes me question, what do these people even know anything about Superman? Like, and I'm sure James Gunn defenders will be like, oh, James Gunn has forgotten more about Superman than you'll ever remember. Probably. And I'm just like, clearly not. This is what he's giving us. It's a fundamental lack of these characters. And I think it's actually a fundamental lack of heroism. It's a fundamental lack of true morality.
However, as time has gone on, we learned that this was more of a Rock favor than a leadership setup cameo. Though admittedly, while Cavill took it with some grace, fans were disappointed, especially the obnoxious Snyder fans, though I think, sadly, this is just a casualty of the DCU, and pushed off ambitions by The Rock to perhaps slightly hijack the DCEU as he had once planned. Originally, Dr. Fate was supposed to return during the end credits for the film, which would have teased a sequel or perhaps Dr. Fate's continued involvement in the universe, though this was cut out before release for unknown reasons. Perhaps to preserve his sacrifice, but more likely to see if it was even needed for him to return in the future. The studio also wanted an end credits scene where Shazam was going to show up and meet Black Adam, perhaps to set up a team up or a battle, but this was blocked by The Rock, who didn't want Black Adam to meet with Shazam, as for some reason he saw it as goofy for Black Adam, despite him being, Shazam's main antagonist in the comics with directly coinciding origins. I gotta give this film props for their costume design. Everyone looks pretty good for the most part, and it all fits in well with the larger DCEU. One annoying quirk, however, and this isn't the film's fault, but I watched the DVD cut of this film since I got it for a couple bucks from the Redbox, but the film on DVD looks like absolute shit. I think studios intentionally do this to upsell the Blu-ray or 4K, but no shot it should have looked this awful. Not the fault of the film, just something I wanted to rant about, since this happens all the time when I buy Warner Brothers or Disney movies on DVD. They just look like shit, so that kind of sucks. I also saw this film in theaters and it looks really good, so it's not a problem with the film, just the shitty DVD. Also, why does Amanda Waller run the Justice Society? That's kind of random. Why didn't she ever use professional superheroes before rather than running the Suicide Squad? I thought the kind of point of the Suicide Squad was that she could kind of do whatever she wanted and break rules and not have to worry about morality or whatever. I think they could have had a different boss like Maxwell Lord, who ran the Justice League for the government in the comics for a number of years. Oh wait, sorry, forgot. Wonder Woman 1984 wasted him and made him not at all Maxwell Lord. Well, that's how the DCEU goes. They could have made up a new character, but God knows they didn't want to do that. Also, I love the Justice Society, but why did they pick Cyclone and Atom Smasher? I would have loved to see some of the crew made out of some of the old-fashioned heroes, like the OG Flash or Green Lantern. Mr. Terrific was cool. Hourman, Sandman. Why not expand the team or just pick better members? I don't know. That was a missed opportunity. Perhaps some of them would have shown up in a potential Justice Society film down the line if that was their mindset, but the first time they show up, and the film opting to only pick 2 fan favorites for a team that realistically wasn't going to be crazy important in the long run, was so weird to me. It also makes me rattle my brain why The Rock was so against crossing over with Shazam. The kid in this film is a superhero fanboy who looks up to superheroes and finds purpose working with them. It's a POV for kids and basically the exact same character as Freddy from Shazam. It just makes no sense besides it being simply The Rock's ego and wanting to be the most important character and aspect of this universe. God forbid The Rock has to fight someone who is any competition. They made Sabak so weak that the second he fights The Rock, he's basically killed, no challenge. Like, the fight scene was like 5 seconds long. And I also think that's part of why The Rock's fame is starting to diminish. He never faces any real challenges in his films, and his shtick is starting to run a little thin, especially since his charm is only going so far when you hear these set stories of him basically being a horrible pain in the ass. I don't think a moment like the Avengers in Infinity War being beaten could happen in a Rock film, even with the predisposition that he would return the following film. So what are the actual stakes? Like, you can't kill The Rock, he can't lose it all, he can't really go through hardship, and the only hardship in this film he has is when he gets sad and gives himself up, which he still easily breaks out of without much issue. The Rock just seems to have such a fragile ego, which I think hurts his own films, since you never see this guy challenged, and the only challenge in this film was totally self-imposed. It was very lame. Black Adam is not good. It follows the formula of an action film from somewhere in the era between 1998 and 2006 and just fails to be exciting. So much of this film is fight scenes, but there are never really any stakes in the film. It's just boring. It also brings back a lot of old superhero film cliches that filmmakers have been trying to avoid the past couple years. The classic sky laser in the climax, flat side superheroes with nothing going on like in the old X-Men films. They're here. Boring, unfunny gag characters, we got them.
The kind of justice you dish out can darken your soul.
It's his darkness that lets him do what heroes like you cannot.
Nope. The Rock is just a normal superhero who causes comical or off-screen deaths. He is no different than any other flat, boring superhero. It's just corny and cheesy, and while Sabak looks okay, he's so forgettable. I had to consult the wiki to remember his name like 5 times during the writing of this retrospective, which normally shouldn't happen for a main villain. I shouldn't have to look it up once. The main conflict of this film is whether or not Black Adam is willing to be a hero.
Things will never be the same, because the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
This film, since it flopped, didn't really add a new hierarchy of power to the DCEU, but did threaten a new hierarchy of shit films in the DCEU. Speaking of the DCEU, the film only minorly connects to the actual universe it's supposedly a part of, like the groan-worthy soft connections to Henry Cavill's Superman, which people blame James Gunn for somehow, despite him not having much, if anything, to do with this film. Finally, The Rock is just 2000s edgy, a la Shadow the Hedgehog at points. The film is competently assembled, but the screenplay is lame and just feels like The Rock's a blatant attempt to hijack the DCEU with shallow connections and a weak plot that does nothing notable but strokes The Rock's inflated ego, a few years after he really had the push to transparently do so, as easily as he attempts to do here. Black Adam costed around $230 million and earns back $393 million. When you factor in marketing, Black Adam probably fell a bit short of breaking even. Critically, the film also squandered, with a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 41 out of 100 on Metacritic. People praised the ensemble cast, but were critical of the thin plot. A lot of critics brought up that this film set up potentially more interesting follow-up films and spin-offs, which, as you know, will not be happening. This movie was nominated for a handful of secondary awards, but ultimately the only award the film won was a Nickelodeon's Kid Choice Awards for Favorite Movie Actor that was awarded to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Some people have apparently claimed that The Rock could be the third person to win a Nickelodeon Lifetime Achievement Award after Dan the Feet Man Schneider and Optimus Prime, the only other Lifetime winners before. However, only time will tell.